the golden lights of Manhattan twinkled beyond the glass walls of the rooftop ballroom, casting an almost cinematic glow over the charity auction. I could feel every eye in the room locked on me, waiting for me to crumble under Charles Beaumont's ridicule. His words, sharp, dismissive, dripping with arrogance, echoed in my ears. She can't afford this piece. Her fortune's already gone. The laughter that rippled through the crowd was meant to bury me, to strip away my dignity in front of New York's elite. But instead of shrinking back, I stood taller. My heart pounded against my ribs like a prisoner demanding release. Yet my hand rose with deliberate calm. "Mr. Grant," I said to the auctioneer, my voice steady enough to silence the whispers, "I'll double his bid." Gasps erupted like a wave, crashing against the marble floor. The certified check I handed over, prepared in advance for exactly this moment, trembled slightly between my fingers, but nobody noticed. They were too busy watching Charles's smug grin evaporate. His face turned pale, almost green, as if I had snatched the very ground from beneath his Italian leather shoes. In that single moment, the room no longer belonged to him. It belonged to me. But to understand why this night mattered so much, I have to take you back. My name is Claire Hensley, and I wasn't born into this glittering world of chandeliers and charity auctions. My family's name carried prestige, yes. But it was my grandmother, Harriet Hensley, who built our fortune with resilience, wisdom, and a heart for community. She raised me to understand that true wealth wasn't measured in numbers, but in integrity. "Remember, Claire," she would say, her eyes crinkling at the corners, "money talks, but character sings." When Harriet passed away 3 years ago, she left me more than her estate. She left me the responsibility of carrying her legacy forward. I built on her foundation, creating my own ventures, balancing business with philanthropy. But with success came rivals, none more venomous than Charles Beaumont. Charles embodied entitlement. His money was inherited, not earned. His charm was polished, but brittle. And ever since my rise in New York's business circles, he'd taken every opportunity to undermine me. Where I saw responsibility, he saw a stage for mockery. The months leading to that auction had been brutal. A failed partnership, carefully sabotaged by Charles, left whispers circulating that my finances were crumbling. Investors grew wary, the press speculated, and invitations to elite gatherings slowed. "Claire Hensley's empire is collapsing," the Wall Street Journal had reported. Sources close to the heiress suggest liquidity problems and mounting debt. Those sources all seem to trace back to Charles's inner circle. Even my closest ally, Olivia Chambers, urged caution. "Claire," she whispered the night before the auction, her voice laced with concern as we shared drinks in my Upper East Side apartment, "you don't need to prove anything to him. Let the world talk. It'll pass." "It's not about proving something to him," I replied, watching the ice melt in my untouched scotch. "It's about standing up for what Harriet built, for what I've built." The painting at the center of tomorrow's auction, a rare Morisot that Harriet had once admired but never purchased, was expected to fetch at least 7 figures. Charles knew I wanted it. He'd made sure everyone knew I couldn't afford it. Or so he thought. What he didn't know was that I'd been preparing. Quietly, strategically, I had secured funds. Not from desperation, but from discipline and foresight. Harriet's voice echoed in my mind. "Always protect what truly matters. Never let arrogance dictate your worth." The night of the auction arrived, and I dressed with careful precision. A midnight blue gown, elegant but understated. No flashy jewelry, just Harriet's simple pearl earrings. As I looked in the mirror, I saw her in my eyes. The same, determination. The same quiet strength. "Tonight's for you, Grandma," I whispered to my reflection. And now, standing in that ballroom with Charles's face draining of color and the whispers growing louder around us, I felt something shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't just about a painting or a bid, it was about reclaiming my narrative. Mr. Grant cleared his throat, visibly flustered. That's $4 million, Miss Hensley. Are you certain?" "Absolutely." My voice didn't waver. Charles stepped forward, his composure fractured. "This is absurd," he hissed, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "You're bluffing." I smiled. Not a vengeful smile, but one of quiet confidence. "The check is certified, Mr. Grant. Please proceed." The auctioneer examined the check, then looked up, with wide eyes. "The bid stands at $4 million. Do I hear 4.5? Charles's jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he might counter. His family's fortune could absorb the hit. But something in my stance must have told him I wouldn't back down. His pride was at stake now, but so was his wallet. And perhaps he realized in that moment that his attempt to humiliate me publicly would cost him dearly either way. Going once, Mr. Grant called. The room held its collective breath. Going twice. A sea of faces turned to Charles, who remained frozen, his knuckles white around his champagne flute. Sold. To Ms. Claire Hensley for $4 million. The applause started slowly, then built to a crescendo. Not just polite applause, but something more. Something that felt like respect. As I moved to complete the transaction, people parted before me. Hands reached out to touch my arm, to offer congratulations. Olivia appeared at my side, her eyes shining with a mixture of awe and concern. "Claire," she whispered. "That was magnificent and terrifying." I squeezed her hand. It was necessary. Across the room, Charles was already retreating, his usual entourage, suddenly preoccupied with their phones or drinks or the view of Manhattan. News travels fast in these circles. By morning, the narrative would be rewritten. Claire Hensley wasn't failing. She was formidable. As I signed the final papers and arranged for the painting's delivery, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration, of my grandmother's legacy, of my own dignity, of the truth. The painting would hang in the Hensley Foundation's main hall, not as a trophy of victory over Charles, but as a symbol of Harriet's enduring wisdom. Real power lies not in humiliating others, but in remaining true to yourself when others try to humiliate you. As I prepared to leave, Charles blocked my path near the elevator. His voice was low, dangerous. "This isn't over, Claire." I looked directly into his eyes, seeing not an enemy but a man trapped by his own insecurities. "You're right, Charles. It's not over. It's just beginning." The morning after the auction dawned bright and crisp, sunlight slicing through my bedroom curtains like nature's alarm clock. I stretched, momentarily disoriented, before the events of the previous night came flooding back. The reef mine. Painting. Charles. $4 million. The shift in power. My phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand, a cascade of notifications lighting up the screen. Emails, texts, voicemails, all responding to last night's drama. I scrolled through them, unsurprised to find 3 missed calls from Richard Kent, my financial advisor, whose cautionary voice I had deliberately ignored when planning my auction strategy. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Instead, I brewed coffee and carried it to my home office, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park. Fall was beginning to paint the trees in brilliant reds and golds, Harriet's favorite season. "Change doesn't have to be painful," she used to say, watching leaves transform and fall. "Sometimes it's just necessary." My peaceful morning reflection was interrupted by the shrill ring of the landline, the number only a select few possessed. "Claire?" Olivia's voice was tight with urgency. "Have you seen the post?" I hadn't. Within minutes, Olivia had texted me the headline, "Hensley heiress splurges millions in apparent power play." The article beneath it was predictably sensationalized, with sources close to the situation, questioning whether my dramatic bid was financially sound or merely a desperate attempt to maintain appearances. Charles wasn't quoted directly, but his fingerprints were all over the insinuations. "It started," I murmured. "What has?" Olivia asked. "The pushback. Charles won't take humiliation lying down." I spent the morning in strategy meetings with my team, the Hensley Group, my grandmother's company that I had expanded into new markets, needed steadying. The recent sabotage had caused genuine damage, not enough to sink us, but enough to make investors nervous. My public display of financial strength had bought us time, but we needed more than just appearances. "The Westlake contract is still on the table," Jennifer, my chief operating officer, reminded me. "If we can secure it by the end of the month, it would send a strong signal." The Westlake contract, a major development project that would revitalize an abandoned industrial district in Brooklyn, was exactly the kind of project Harriet would have championed. Economically sound, community-focused, with long-term benefits beyond mere profit. It was also a project Charles had been circling, hoping to add it to his portfolio of gentrification ventures that prioritized luxury over community needs. "I'll schedule a meeting with Marcus Westlake next week," I decided. "We'll present our revised proposal in person." As the meeting disbanded, Richard finally cornered me in the hallway. His perpetually worried expression was even more pronounced today, deep lines carved between his brows. $4 million, Claire," he said without preamble, without consulting me. "It was necessary." "Necessary for what? Your pride?" We're in a precarious position right now. That money was earmarked for operational costs during this transition. I led him back into my office, closing the door. Richard, I've known you since I was a child. You managed Harriet's money brilliantly. But this isn't just about finances. It's about perception. If New York believes the Hensley Group is failing, then it will fail, regardless of our actual balance sheets. He sighed, removing his glasses to pinch the bridge of his nose. And Charles Beaumont? Was humiliating him part of the strategy too? I didn't humiliate him. He tried to humiliate me, and I refused to play the victim. I moved to the window, watching a jogger navigate the park paths below. The painting isn't just an impulse purchase. It's an investment, both financially and symbolically. It shows strength when Charles wanted to showcase weakness. Richard didn't look convinced, but he nodded slowly. Just consult me next time, before you liquidate assets or move large sums. I will, I promised, though we both knew that in the chess game unfolding between Charles and me, sometimes moves had to be made in the moment. After Richard left, I finally returned Charles's call, because of course he had called, his name appearing between legitimate business contacts on my phone log. Claire, he answered on the first ring, his voice a study in false warmth. I was beginning to think you were avoiding me. Just a busy morning. Charles, what can I do for you? I wanted to congratulate you on your acquisition last night. Quite the statement piece. Thank you. It will look wonderful in the Foundation's collection. A slight pause. Yes, the Hensley Foundation. Still proceeding with the gala next month? I'd heard rumors it might be scaled back, given recent challenges. There it was, the subtle dig, the implication that my financial situation would force me to compromise Harriet's annual charity gala, the cornerstone of our philanthropic calendar. The gala will proceed as planned, I replied smoothly. In fact, we're expanding the silent auction portion this year. I trust you'll attend? Wouldn't miss it. His tone darkened slightly. Though I wonder if such extravagance is wise in your position. My position is exactly where I want to be, Charles. I kept my voice light, professional. Was there anything else? Just one thing. I had lunch with Marcus Westlake yesterday. Fascinating man. Such vision for that Brooklyn project. My stomach tightened. Charles' meeting with Marcus wasn't a coincidence. Yes, he is visionary, I agreed. I'm meeting with him next week to finalize our partnership. Charles's laugh was soft, almost gentle. Are you certain about that? My understanding is that he's considering multiple proposals now. The implication was clear. Charles had inserted himself into negotiations that had previously been exclusive between the Hensley Group and Westlake Development. Competition is healthy, I said, though we both knew this wasn't about business competition. This was personal. Indeed it is. May the best vision win. He paused meaningfully. Give my regards to Olivia. She looked stunning last night, as always. The call ended, but Charles's last comment lingered unpleasantly. The casual reference to Olivia felt deliberate, a reminder that he had access to my inner circle, that no relationship was impervious to his influence. I stood by the window for a long time after that, watching the city pulse below. The auction had been a victory, but a small one. Charles was already regrouping, targeting the foundations of my business and personal life with surgical precision. That evening, alone in my apartment with a barely touched dinner, I found myself standing before Harriet's portrait in my living room. Her eyes, painted with remarkable skill to capture their perceptiveness, seemed to look right through me. What would you do? I whispered to her image. In the silence that followed, I could almost hear her response. The same thing you've always done, Claire. Build. Don't destroy. Create. Don't tear down. And remember, dignity can't be taken. It can only be surrendered. I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Charles wanted to make this personal, to drag me into a bitter public feud that would diminish us both. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Tomorrow, I would call Marcus Westlake and move our meeting up. The Westlake contract wasn't just business now. It was a statement about the future I wanted to build versus the one Charles would create. The game was changing, the stakes were higher. But unlike Charles, I wasn't playing to win. At all costs. I was playing to win with integrity. The sleek glass headquarters of Westlake Development rose from the Brooklyn waterfront like a vision of the future, appropriate for a company that specialized in transforming forgotten spaces into thriving communities. As my car pulled up to the entrance, I smoothed my charcoal pencil skirt and mentally rehearsed my pitch one final time. Ms. Hensley, Marcus Westlake greeted me with a firm handshake as I entered his corner office. I appreciate you moving our meeting up. Marcus was in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the weathered hands of someone who had worked construction sites before managing them. Unlike many developers who inherited their empires, he had built his from the ground up, giving him a perspective. That aligned with Harriet's philosophy, and mine. "Thank you for accommodating me," I replied, settling into the chair across from him. "I'm eager to discuss our vision for the Riverside project." For the next hour, we reviewed the Hensley Group's proposal, a mixed-use development that would preserve the historic brick facade of the abandoned factory while creating affordable housing, community spaces, and small business incubators. Unlike most developers who pushed for luxury condominiums to maximize profit, our plan prioritized sustainable growth and community integration. Marcus nodded appreciatively as I concluded. "Your grandmother would be proud, Claire. This echoes her approach to the Chelsea renovation in the 90s. You knew Harriet?" "Everyone in New York development knew Harriet Hensley," he smiled. "She outbid me once for a property in Queens. When I asked why she wanted it so badly, she said, 'Because the neighborhood needs a library more than another parking garage.' I couldn't even be angry." I laughed, recognizing Harriet's practical wisdom. "That sounds like her." Marcus's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "I should mention that I've received another proposal for Riverside, one with significant financial incentives." My smile remained fixed, though my heart rate accelerated. "Charles Beaumont." "Yes." Marcus looked mildly surprised. "You knew?" "Let's just say Charles and I have different visions for New York's future." Marcus shuffled through some papers, pulling out a sleek black folder embossed with the Beaumont Industries logo. His team is proposing luxury residential towers, a high-end shopping complex, and a private marina. The profit margins are impressive. I leaned forward. "And the community impact?" "Minimal affordable housing units. No dedicated public spaces beyond what zoning requires." He hesitated. "But the tax revenue would be substantial. And his financing package is—" He paused, clearly uncomfortable. "More aggressive than mine?" I supplied. "He's offering to close immediately, full payment, no contingencies." Marcus met my gaze directly. "He also mentioned that your recent financial fluctuations might impact project stability." There it was, Charles's poison, already spreading. I took a measured breath, remembering what was actually at stake here. This wasn't just about winning against Charles. It was about doing right by the community. "Marcus, I won't pretend the Hensley Group hasn't faced challenges recently, but our financing is solid, our vision is sound, and our commitment is unwavering." I gestured to his window, which overlooked the Brooklyn neighborhood beyond. "That community has waited decades for revitalization. They deserve more than becoming collateral damage in another luxury development that prices them out of their own homes." Marcus studied me, his expression unreadable. "The board votes next week. I'll present both proposals fairly." As I stood to leave, I noticed a framed photograph on his desk. Marcus with an elderly woman outside what looked like a community center. "My mother," he explained, following my gaze. "She lived in Red Hook her entire life. That center was built by a developer who actually listened to what the neighborhood needed." He looked at me thoughtfully. "Profit matters, Claire, but legacy matters more." I nodded, understanding the subtle message. I couldn't agree more. Back at my office, Olivia was waiting, her expression a mixture of concern and excitement. "How did it go with Marcus?" "Charles has made his move," replied, setting down my portfolio. "But I think we still have the edge. Westlake cares about more than just maximizing returns." Olivia handed me a cup of coffee. Strong, black, just as I preferred during strategy sessions. "Speaking of Charles," she said carefully, "there's something you should see." She pulled up an article on her tablet. The headline made my stomach drop. "Hensley Foundation. Under scrutiny. Financial irregularities alleged." "This can't be happening," I murmured, scanning the article. "According to an anonymous source with insider knowledge, the Hensley Foundation, the charitable arm of our business, dedicated to education and community development, was being investigated for mismanagement of funds." "It's completely fabricated," Olivia assured me. "I've already spoken with our legal team. They're demanding a retraction." I set the tablet down, a cold anger settling in my chest. The auction had been one thing, a public spectacle with a clear winner and loser. But this was attacking Harriet's legacy at its core. The foundation had been her pride, her purpose after retirement. "Charles is getting desperate," I said quietly. "He knows he can't beat us on merit, so he's trying to destroy our reputation instead." Olivia hesitated, then placed a small envelope on my desk. This came for you this morning. Courier delivery, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Charles and Richard, my financial advisor, having lunch at an exclusive restaurant downtown. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 days before the auction. This doesn't mean, anything, I said, but the doubt had already taken root. Richard and Charles move in the same circles. Claire, Olivia's voice was gentle but firm, we need to consider the possibility that someone on our team is feeding information to Charles. The timing of his attacks is too precise. He knew about Westlake. He knew about the Foundation's quarterly review. He even knew about the painting you wanted at the auction. I stared at the photograph, remembering Richard's reaction to my bid. His concern had seemed genuine, but what if it was something else? Fear of discovery? I won't start suspecting everyone around me, I said finally. That's what Charles wants, to isolate me, make me paranoid. Olivia nodded, but her expression remained troubled. Just be careful who you trust right now. That evening, I canceled my dinner plans and instead visited the site of our proposed riverside development. The abandoned factory complex stood silent against the darkening sky, its brick walls weathered but still proud. I walked the perimeter, imagining what it could become. Not a playground for the wealthy, but a vital part of the neighborhood's renewal. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You're fighting a losing battle. Accept my offer and walk away with your dignity intact. CB. How had Charles known I was here? I scanned the quiet street, suddenly feeling exposed. Another text followed. The board already favors my proposal. Don't embarrass yourself further. I turned off my phone without replying and continued my walk, thinking about Harriet and what she would do. She had faced opposition throughout her career. Men who thought they could intimidate her, outmaneuver her, or simply wait for her to fail. She had overcome them not by becoming like them, but by remaining steadfastly herself. Your greatest strength, she once told me, is that you can stand alone without being lonely in your convictions. As I turned to leave, an elderly man emerged from a nearby bodega, eyeing me curiously. You with that development company? He called out. Yes, I replied. Hensley Group. We're hoping to revitalize this area. Huh? He looked skeptical. Heard some fancy towers might be going up. More places none of us can afford. That's one proposal, I acknowledged, but not mine. What's yours then? I explained our vision briefly. Affordable housing, preserved, historical elements, community spaces, local business opportunities. The man listened, then nodded slowly. Sounds nice, but those don't make as much money, do they? And money usually wins. Not always, I said, with more confidence than I felt at that moment. Sometimes the right thing wins. He chuckled, a low, skeptical sound. Lady, I've lived in this neighborhood 67 years. The right thing needs help winning. As I drove home through the city lights, his words echoed in my mind. The right thing needs help winning. Charles was playing to win at any cost. Was I naive to think I could defeat him while maintaining my principles? I thought of the photograph. Richard and Charles, heads together in conversation. I thought of the planted news story about the foundation. I thought of Charles somehow tracking my movements to the development site. A strategy was forming in my mind. Not to sink to Charles's level, but to outthink him. To anticipate his next moves and counter them before they happened. To fight not just for a business victory, but for Harriet's vision of what business should be. By the time I reached my apartment, I had made 3 decisions. First, I would commission an independent audit of the foundation, not because there was anything to find, but to prove definitively that there wasn't. Second, I would meet with every board member of Westlake Development individually, making our case person to person. And third, I would confront Richard directly. If he was betraying me to Charles, I needed to know. And if he wasn't, he deserved the chance to prove it. The game had changed. Charles wanted war. I would give him something different, something he wouldn't expect and couldn't counter. Integrity wielded like a weapon. The Hensley Group's conference room buzzed with tension as I faced Richard across the polished oak table. Morning light streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced between us in the silence. Is there something you want to tell me, Richard? I finally asked, sliding the photograph across the table. He picked it up, adjusted his glasses, and studied it with a frown. Ah, I see. Do you? My voice remained calm, controlled. Because what I see is my financial advisor having lunch with someone who's actively trying to destroy me. Richard set the photograph down carefully. It's not what you think, Claire. Then enlighten me. He sighed, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. Charles approached me, yes. He wanted information about your finances, about the foundation, about Westlake. He offered a considerable sum. My chest tightened. And I told him nothing, of course. Richard looked genuinely offended. I've managed your family's finances for 30 years. I held your grandmother's hand in the hospital when she made me promise to protect you and her legacy. He pushed the photograph back toward me. That lunch was me telling Charles to his face that I wouldn't betray that trust. I studied him, searching for any sign of deception. Then why didn't you tell me he approached you? Because I handled it, and because you already have enough to worry about. He leaned forward. Claire, I've watched you grow from a headstrong teenager into a formidable businesswoman. I'm proud of you. But this vendetta with Charles, it's becoming dangerous. It's not a vendetta. It's a defense. Is it? Richard raised an eyebrow. The auction was about defense? I stood, pacing to the window. The auction was about drawing a line, about showing Charles, and everyone else, that I won't be bullied or undermined. And now? I turned to face him. Now it's about protecting what Harriet built, what we're still building. Richard nodded slowly. I believe you, but Charles doesn't play by the same rules. He doesn't care about collateral damage, which is why we need to be smarter, more strategic. I sat back down, leaning forward. Richard, I need to know, is there anything in our finances that could be exploited? Any vulnerability Charles might target? He hesitated, adjusting his glasses again, a nervous habit I recognized from years of board meetings. Your liquidity is tighter than I'd like, especially after the auction purchase. The foundation is sound, but its assets are mostly restricted to program work. And the Westlake project? He trailed off. What about Westlake? If we don't secure it, the quarterly projections will suffer. Investors might get nervous. So we secure it, I said simply. Starting today. After Richard left, Olivia entered with a stack of folders, dossiers on each Westlake Development Board member, compiled overnight by our research team. 7 members total, she explained, spreading them across the table. Marcus is CEO, but he only gets 1 vote. We need 4 to win. We spent the morning developing a personalized approach for each board member. Not manipulation, but genuine connection. Edward Chen was passionate about architectural preservation. Janet Rodriguez had built her career advocating for affordable housing. Michael Abernathy had grown up in a neighborhood similar to the one we hoped to revitalize. This is good, Olivia said as we finished. But Charles will be making the same moves. What's our edge? I smiled for the first time that day. Authenticity. Charles will tell them what he thinks they want to hear. We'll show them what we actually believe. The week that followed was a blur of meetings, presentations, and late-night strategy sessions. I met with each board member individually, listened to their concerns, shared our vision, and addressed their doubts honestly, including those about our financial stability. Yes, we've faced challenges, I admitted to Janet Rodriguez over lunch, but our foundation is solid. And unlike Beaumont Industries, we're not over-leveraged in speculative ventures. She looked surprised. That's not what I heard about Beaumont. No? I kept my tone neutral, curious. Janet glanced around the restaurant before lowering her voice. There are rumors that Charles has been taking significant risks lately, highly leveraged positions in volatile markets. I filed this information away without comment. If true, it might explain Charles's increasingly aggressive tactics. Perhaps he needed the Westlake contract as badly as I did, though for different reasons. Between board meetings, I pushed forward with the foundation audit, hiring a respected independent firm known for their thoroughness. It was an expensive and time-consuming process, but necessary to counter Charles's whisper campaign about financial irregularities. The preliminary findings look clean, Olivia reported 3 days into the audit. No red flags, no questionable transactions. As expected, I replied. But we need the final report before the Westlake vote. Charles is counting on innuendo and suspicion. We'll counter with facts. The evening before the board vote, I was working late in my office when my assistant buzzed through. Ms. Hensley, Mr. Beaumont is here to see you. I paused, surprised by the directness of this move. Send him in. Charles entered with his characteristic confidence, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He surveyed my office with an appraising eye before taking a seat without being invited. Claire, he smiled, as if we were old friends meeting for dinner. You've been busy. As have you, I replied coolly, planting false stories, approaching my advisors, tracking my movements. Hardly the actions of someone confident in their position. His smile didn't waver. Business is business, nothing personal. Spreading lies about the foundation my grandmother built is very personal, Charles. He waved a dismissive hand. Market competition, you understand. What do you want? Charles leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. I want to offer you a way out. A graceful exit. From what, exactly? From a fight you can't win. He pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on my desk. My final offer for Westlake. I'll absorb the Hensley Group's development division at a premium. Your investors will be thrilled. You maintain control of the foundation and other business interests. Everyone wins. I didn't touch the folder. And the Riverside community will benefit from increased property values and tax revenue, while being priced out of their own neighborhood. Charles sighed, as if I were a child failing to grasp a simple concept. Evolution is inevitable, Claire. Some neighborhoods gentrify, others decay. That's the market. That's your market, I corrected. Not mine. His expression hardened. I have 4. Board votes locked up. Tomorrow is a formality. Then why the offer? I challenged. Why not just enjoy your victory? A flicker of something, uncertainty, crossed his face before he masked it. Professional courtesy, and perhaps recognition of a worthy opponent. I stood, signaling the end of our meeting. I'll see you tomorrow at the vote, Charles. He rose, buttoning his jacket with deliberate precision. One last thing, Claire. That audit you're rushing through? I'd be very careful about what it might uncover. Foundations as old as Hensley's often have historical irregularities. The threat was clear. He had something planned. Some final card to play. Transparency doesn't frighten me, Charles. I met his gaze steadily. It never has. After he left, I called Olivia. Immediately. We need to accelerate the audit. Charles is planning something. I'm already on it, she replied, her voice tense. Claire, there's something else. A donation from 2018. $10 million from an offshore account. The paperwork is incomplete. My blood ran cold. That's impossible. Harriet would never... I know. I'm digging deeper. But if Charles brings this up tomorrow, find the truth, I said firmly. Whatever it is. As midnight approached, I stood at my apartment window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow would determine not just the fate of the Riverside project, but potentially the future of the Hensley legacy. Charles had played his moves skillfully, pushing me to the edge of a precipice. But he had made one critical mistake. He thought this was about winning and losing, about power and pride. For me, it had always been about something else. The vision Harriet had instilled in me, the belief that business could be both profitable and principled. Tomorrow, one way or another, that vision would be tested. The Westlake Development boardroom was all sleek minimalism, glass, steel, and understated luxury. 7 leather chairs surrounded the oval table, each occupied by a person who would decide the fate of the Riverside project. I sat at one end, Charles at the other, like opposing generals on a battlefield. Marcus Westlake opened the meeting precisely at 9 a.m. Good morning, everyone. Today we'll hear final presentations from both the Hensley Group and Beaumont Industries regarding the Riverside development, followed by questions and a vote. Charles presented first, his pitch polished to perfection. Glossy renderings displayed gleaming glass towers rising from the waterfront, a private marina dotted with yachts, upscale retail spaces, and a rooftop restaurant with panoramic views of Manhattan. This development will generate over $12 million in annual tax revenue, he concluded smoothly. Property values in surrounding areas will increase by an estimated 40% within 5 years. The return on investment for Westlake will exceed projections by nearly 30%. His numbers were impressive, his delivery flawless. I watched the board members, noting their reactions. Edward Chen's face remained impassive. Janet Rodriguez frowned slightly at the mention of property value increases, understanding the implications for current residents. Michael Abernathy nodded appreciatively at the financial projections. When my turn came, I didn't stand immediately. Instead, I placed a worn leather portfolio on the table, Harriet's portfolio, which had accompanied her to countless meetings throughout her career. Before I show you renderings and statistics, I began, I want to share something else. I opened the portfolio and removed several photographs. These are images of the Chelsea Restoration Project from 1994. My grandmother's vision transformed a declining neighborhood while preserving its character and keeping its community intact. I passed the photos around. The businesses you see there? 80% are still operating today, many by the same families. The residential units? Still affordable? Still home to people who lived there before renovation began. Now I stood, moving to the presentation screen. The Hensley proposal for Riverside offers something different than luxury towers and exclusive amenities. We're proposing a development that serves both profit and purpose. My presentation detailed a mixed-use development that preserved the historic factory buildings while creating modern spaces. Inside, affordable housing units alongside market-rate apartments, incubator spaces for local businesses, a public riverfront park instead of a private marina. Our projected ROI is 18% over 5 years, I acknowledged. Lower than Beaumont's projection, yes, but our community impact score is triple their proposal's rating. And our risk assessment, I paused, meeting Charles's gaze directly, is, significantly more favorable. The subtle emphasis wasn't lost on the board. In recent days, whispers about Beaumont Industries' leveraged positions had grown louder. Nothing concrete, but enough to raise questions. As I concluded, Marcus thanked us both and opened the floor for questions. Most were standard inquiries about financing, timelines, and zoning considerations. Then Janet Rodriguez spoke up. Ms. Hensley, there have been rumors about financial irregularities at the Hensley Foundation. Could these impact your ability to deliver on this project? I felt Charles shift forward in his seat, the slightest smile playing at the corner of his mouth. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. I'm glad you asked, I replied calmly, extracting a sealed envelope from my briefcase. I commissioned an independent audit of the foundation when these rumors first surfaced. The final report was delivered to me this morning. I slid the envelope across to Marcus. The results confirm what I already knew. The Hensley Foundation's finances are completely transparent and properly managed, with one notable exception. The room grew still. Charles's smile faltered slightly. In 2018, the foundation received an anonymous donation of $10 million through an offshore account, I continued. Initially, this appeared suspicious, exactly the kind of transaction someone might point to as evidence of impropriety. I let the implication hang in the air for a moment before continuing. Further investigation revealed that the donor was Joseph Beaumont, Charles's father. Gasps rippled around the table. Charles's face drained of color. Joseph made the donation anonymously because the money was earmarked for the Opioid Family Recovery Program, an initiative to help families affected by the opioid crisis. He didn't want publicity because Beaumont Pharmaceuticals was, at that time, facing scrutiny over their marketing of OxyContin. The board members exchanged glances. The Beaumont family's connection to the opioid crisis was rarely mentioned in polite company, but everyone knew the history. My grandmother accepted the donation on one condition, that it genuinely help families in need, without publicity or corporate whitewashing. The incomplete paperwork was an intentional firewall to protect both the donation's purpose and, ironically, the Beaumont family reputation. Charles stood abruptly. This is absurd. My father would never— Your father's personal correspondence with Harriet Hensley is included in the audit report, I interrupted quietly, along with bank records authenticating the transaction. The room fell silent. Charles slowly sank back into his chair, his composure visibly shaken. Marcus cleared his throat. Well, that's illuminating. Any other questions before we vote? Michael Abernathy leaned forward. Mr. Beaumont, there are concerns about your company's current financial leverage positions. Could you address those? Charles straightened his tie, struggling to regain his footing. Those concerns are baseless. Beaumont Industries maintains a conservative leverage ratio across all our ventures. And yet, Edward Chen interjected, your recent acquisition of European assets required significant debt financing during a period of rising interest rates. The conversation was slipping away from Charles, not because of my orchestration, but because his own actions had created legitimate concerns. I remained silent, letting the board's questions reveal what my accusations never could. When the vote finally came, it wasn't even close. 5-2 in favor of the Hensley proposal. As the meeting adjourned, board members gathered in small groups discussing next steps. Charles moved toward the exit, his shoulders rigid with suppressed fury. I followed him into the hallway. Charles, he turned, his expression cold. Congratulations. You've won this round through character assassination and family secrets. No, I shook my, head. I won by presenting the better proposal. The information about your father wasn't meant to embarrass you. It was to clear my grandmother's name from the smears you planted. How noble, he sneered. Your father did something honorable, Charles. He tried to help families hurt by his company's actions. There's no shame in that. His jaw tightened. Stay away from my family's legacy. I could say the same to you about mine. For a moment, something like understanding passed between us. Two people carrying the weight of family names, family histories, family sins and virtues. This isn't over, he said finally. But the threat sounded hollow, performative. It could be, I suggested quietly. New York is big enough for different visions of development, different definitions of success. He studied me for a long moment before walking away without another word. As I watched him go, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a weary relief that this chapter was closing, and the hope that the Riverside community would truly benefit from what would rise from its abandoned factory. Marcus appeared at my elbow. That was quite a meeting. I smiled faintly. Not our typical development discussion. Your grandmother would have handled it exactly the same way. He offered his hand. Welcome to the Westlake family of partners. I look forward to breaking ground together. Outside, the September sun warmed my face as I called Olivia with the news. We got it, I said simply. Her cheer brought my first genuine smile of the day. I never doubted you, she replied. But Claire? What's about Charles? I watched a group of school children cross the street, backpacks bouncing, completely unaware of corporate battles and family legacies. Charles will survive, I said, and hopefully learn something. The truth was, I didn't want an enemy. I didn't want a rivalry that would consume years of energy and creativity that could be better spent building something worthwhile. Charles had chosen this fight, but I wouldn't let it define either of us. Harriet's words came back to me. Success without integrity is failure in disguise. Today, at least, integrity had won. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But for now, I allowed myself to feel the simple satisfaction of knowing that I had stayed true to Harriet's legacy. And my own. 6 weeks later, autumn had fully embraced New York. Central Park blazed with crimson and gold, and a crisp breeze carried the promise of winter. Inside the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Grand Ballroom, the annual Hensley Foundation Gala was in full swing, a celebration of both philanthropy and resilience. I stood near the entrance, greeting donors and community partners as they arrived. The audit report had been made public, clearing the Foundation's name completely. Donations were up, the Westlake contract was secure, and the painting I'd purchased at the auction, the Moriso that had started this entire saga, hung prominently near the stage, a symbol of both victory and continuity. Claire, Olivia appeared at my side, resplendent in emerald silk. The governor just arrived, and the mayor is asking about the Riverside project. Timeline. Tell him we break ground in March, I replied, adjusting my grandmother's pearl necklace, the only jewelry I wore with my simple black gown. And ask Edward Chen to join us. He's been instrumental in preserving the original architecture. As Olivia departed, Richard approached with a champagne flute. You should be celebrating, he chided gently, offering me the glass. The foundation is thriving. The Westlake contract is secure. Charles Beaumont has retreated to lick his wounds. It's a victory on all fronts. I accepted the champagne but didn't drink. It doesn't feel like victory, Richard. It feels like a correction. Things moving back into their proper alignment. He nodded, understanding. Harriet would say the same thing. We stood in comfortable silence, watching New York's elite mingle with community leaders and nonprofit directors. Exactly the diverse mix Harriet had always insisted upon for foundation events. Politicians alongside school teachers. Wall Street executives chatting with neighborhood activists. She's not coming, Richard said suddenly. Who? Margaret Beaumont, Charles's mother. She always attended Harriet's galas, even after Joseph passed. I thought she might continue the tradition. I frowned. Margaret and Harriet had been unlikely friends, women from different worlds who had found common ground in their philanthropic work. Did we send an invitation? Of course, no response. Something about this bothered me more than it should have. The rift between Charles and me had apparently widened to include family connections that predated both of us. The evening progressed smoothly. I gave a brief speech about the Foundation's work over the past year and unveiled plans for the coming one, including the Riverside Development's community spaces. The silent auction exceeded fundraising goals. The orchestra played Harriet's favorite pieces. By all measures, the gala was a triumph. Yet as midnight approached and guests began to depart, I felt a strange emptiness, as if something essential was missing from the celebration. "You've been distracted all evening," Olivia observed as we supervised the cleanup. "What's wrong?" I shook my head. "Nothing tangible, just thinking about Margaret Beaumont. About broken connections." Olivia's expression softened. "Claire, you can't fix everything. Some bridges stay burned." Maybe. I wasn't convinced. But this particular bridge wasn't mine to burn. It belonged to Harriet and Margaret. The next morning, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called Margaret Beaumont's private secretary and requested a meeting. To my even greater surprise, Margaret agreed to see me that afternoon. The Beaumont mansion on Fifth Avenue was a testament to old New York money, imposing stonework, discreet security, and the kind of quiet luxury that never needed to announce itself. I was shown into a sunlit conservatory where Margaret Beaumont sat reading beside a small fountain. At 78, Margaret retained the elegant posture and sharp eyes that had made her a formidable presence in New York society for decades. She set her book aside and gestured to the chair opposite her. "Claire," she nodded, neither warm nor cold. "This is unexpected. Thank you for seeing me," I replied, taking the offered seat. "I noticed you weren't at the gala last night. Did you?" Her voice was dry. I assumed my family name had been removed from the guest list permanently. "Never," I said firmly. "Your friendship with my grandmother transcended business disagreements." Margaret studied me carefully. "And yet here we are, with my son, and you locked in what the Post is calling Manhattan's most vicious corporate feud." "The Post exaggerates," I said, "as does Charles at times." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "My son has always had a flair for the dramatic. Joseph encouraged it, said it made him a bold businessman. I warned it would make him a reckless one." The mention of Joseph created an opening. "Mrs. Beaumont, I recently learned about your husband's anonymous donation to the Foundation's opioid program." Her expression remained carefully neutral. "Did you?" "Yes, and I want you to know that I respect the intention behind it. Joseph was trying to help families affected by a crisis his company had contributed to." Margaret's gaze sharpened. "Is that how you see it? As atonement?" "I see it as complicated, as human." I leaned forward slightly. "Harriet understood that. It's why she accepted the donation on his terms." Harriet understood many things. For the first time, emotion crept into Margaret's voice. She understood that legacy is more than buildings and bank accounts. It's the values you instill in the next generation. The unspoken criticism of Charles hung in the air between us. "I'm not here to criticize your son," I said gently. "I'm here because some connections shouldn't be severed by business conflicts." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "Charles told me what happened at Westlake, about Joseph's donation being exposed. It wasn't meant to humiliate him," I explained. "It was to clear false accusations about the Foundation." "Accusations he planted?" Margaret stated flatly, not a question. I didn't deny it. There was no point in pretense with this woman who had navigated New York's social and business currents for decades. "Yes," I acknowledged. "Charles has been aggressive in his competition with me." Margaret sighed, suddenly looking every one of her years. "My son believes business is warfare. Joseph taught him that." I tried to balance the lesson, but she shook her head. "Some seeds take root deeper than others. It's not too late," I suggested, "for a different approach." "For Charles?" She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Perhaps. Perhaps not. But I appreciate your visit, Claire, and your discretion regarding Joseph's donation." As I prepared to leave, Margaret touched my arm lightly. "Harriet would be proud of you, not just for your business success, but for coming here today. She always said the hardest bridges to build are the ones across troubled waters." I smiled, recognizing one of Harriet's favorite sayings. "She told me that too." "Next year," Margaret said as her butler appeared to show me out, "I will attend the gala. Some traditions should continue, regardless of corporate squabbles." The visit left me feeling lighter somehow, as if I'd fulfilled an obligation I hadn't even recognized. Charles and I might remain business rivals, but the deeper connections, the ones that had bound our families together through decades, deserved preservation. As my car pulled away from the Beaumont mansion, my phone rang. It was Marcus Westlake. "Claire," his voice was tight with urgency. "There's a situation with the Riverside property. Someone submitted an environmental impact challenge that could delay permitting by months." My momentary peace evaporated. "Charles." "We don't know that," Marcus cautioned, "but the timing is suspicious. Can you come to my office?" I directed my driver to change course, already mentally cataloging potential responses. The environmental law. Challenge was a delaying tactic, not a permanent obstacle, but delays could be costly, both financially and in community trust. As we navigated through Manhattan traffic, I realized that despite the morning's moment of reconciliation with Margaret, the wider conflict was far from resolved. Charles was still Charles, unwilling to accept defeat, determined to assert his vision regardless of consequences. But I was still me, Harriet Hensley's granddaughter, committed to building something that would last beyond quarterly profits. The game continued, the stakes ever-changing. But the core truth remained constant. Integrity wasn't just a moral stance. It was a strategic advantage. Charles might win battles through underhanded tactics, but I would win the war by remaining true to Harriet's principles and my own. The Riverside Project would proceed, the community would benefit, and whatever obstacles Charles threw in our path would become stepping stones instead. As we pulled up to the Westlake building, I took a deep breath and prepared for the next challenge. Not with anger or resentment, but with the steady resolve that had become my hallmark. Some fights were worth having, especially when they were about more than just winning. The Environmental Impact Challenge was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, the Riverside Project faced a barrage of obstacles: zoning appeals, community concerns raised by suspiciously well-funded neighborhood groups, and a sudden interest from historical preservation committees that had previously ignored the abandoned factory complex. Each challenge bore Charles Beaumont's invisible fingerprints, though never in ways that could be directly traced back to him. He had become more sophisticated in his opposition, more patient. This wasn't the impulsive rivalry that had culminated in the auction showdown. This was calculated attrition. I stood at the Riverside site on a cold February morning, watching my breath form clouds in the air as construction crews prepared the ground for foundation work. We were 3 months behind schedule, but finally moving forward. "It's really happening," Olivia said beside me, huddled in her camel hair coat. "Despite everything." "Because of everything," I corrected gently. These delays forced us to improve the plans. The additional community input sessions strengthened local support. She gave me a sidelong glance. Always finding the silver lining, Harriet taught me that obstacles aren't roadblocks, they're redirections. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Marcus Westlake, who navigated the muddy ground with the ease of someone who had spent decades on construction sites. "The permit finally cleared," he announced without preamble. "We're officially greenlit for Phase 1. Relief washed through me. After months of bureaucratic battles, this milestone felt monumental. "Any last-minute surprises from our friends at Beaumont Industries?" Olivia asked wryly. Marcus shook his head. "Charles seems to have moved on to other targets. Word is he's pursuing a major development in Miami, luxury condos on reclaimed wetlands." I frowned. "That sounds environmentally problematic." "It is," Marcus confirmed, "but Florida's regulations are more flexible than New York's, and Charles has friends in the state government." The news settled uneasily. I was relieved that Charles's attention had shifted away from Riverside, but troubled by what that might mean for Miami's ecosystem and the communities that depended on it. "Don't look so concerned," Olivia nudged me. "You can't save every neighborhood from Charles Beaumont." "I know," I sighed, "but sometimes I wonder if we're just playing a game of whack-a-mole. He moves on to damage somewhere else." Marcus studied me with a knowing expression. "Your grandmother had the same dilemma. She used to say, 'You can't stop all the wolves, but you can protect your own forest.'" I smiled at this echo of Harriet. "She had a saying for everything, didn't she?" "And she was usually right," Marcus replied. "Now let's talk construction timelines. The community center foundation needs to be laid before the spring rains hit." We spent the next hour walking the site, discussing technical details and making decisions that would shape this corner of Brooklyn for decades to come. This was the work that mattered, not the corporate chess match with Charles, but the tangible creation of spaces where people would live, work, and thrive. As Marcus departed for another meeting, Olivia checked her phone and frowned. "Claire, there's something you should see." She handed me her tablet, open to a financial news site. The headline made my stomach drop. "Beaumont Industries announces hostile takeover bid for Mercer Holdings." Mercer Holdings was a mid-sized development company specializing in affordable housing, and one of the Hensley Group's key partners in several ongoing projects, including parts of Riverside. If Charles gained control, he could potentially sabotage our work from the inside. This is no coincidence, I said, scanning the article quickly. He's found another angle of attack. It gets worse. Olivia swiped to another article. Mercer's stock jumped 18% on the news. Shareholders are excited about the premium Charles is offering. I handed the tablet back, my mind racing through implications and options. Call Richard. We need to know if we have the capital to make a counteroffer, and set up a meeting with James Mercer as soon as possible. You want to enter a bidding war with Charles? Olivia looked skeptical. After everything we've just been through with Riverside? Not a bidding war, I clarified. A conversation about values and vision. James built Mercer Holdings on principles similar to Harriet's. He cares about more than just maximizing shareholder returns. Olivia nodded, already typing rapidly on her phone. I'll make the calls. But Claire, be prepared. Charles is offering a 25% premium. That's hard for any board to refuse. She was right, of course. Business was still business, and fiduciary duty often trumped personal preference. But I had to try. Too much was at stake. Not just for the Hensley Group, but for the communities that would be affected if Charles redirected Mercer's resources toward luxury developments. That evening, I met James Mercer at his favorite steakhouse in Midtown, an old-school establishment with wood paneling and career waiters who knew his preferred bourbon without asking. James was in his early 70s, with a weathered face that reflected decades in construction before he moved to the executive suite. Unlike many developers, he had started as a carpenter, building his company from the ground up, with an intimate knowledge of both physical structures and the people who inhabited them. Claire, he greeted me with a firm handshake. I figured I'd be hearing from you today. I imagine you're hearing from a lot of people, I replied as we settled into our booth. He gave a short laugh. My phone hasn't stopped ringing since the announcement. Board members, shareholders, competitors, and now, you. I'm not here to make a counteroffer, I said directly, knowing James appreciated straightforwardness. His eyebrows rose. No, that's a surprise. The Hensley Group doesn't have the capital to match what Charles is offering, I acknowledged. And even if we did, entering a bidding war would drain resources better spent on actual development. James nodded slowly, sipping his bourbon. So, why are you here? To remind you what's at stake. Mercer Holdings has built over 15,000 affordable housing units in the past decade. You've revitalized neighborhoods without gentrifying them. You've created spaces where regular people can afford to live with dignity. And made a profit doing it, James added. Let's not paint me as a saint, Claire. I've done well. Yes, you have. I agreed. But not by maximizing short-term gains at the expense of long-term community health. That's what separates you from Charles Beaumont. James leaned back, studying me thoughtfully. Charles says he'll maintain our existing projects. And do you believe him? He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. I've known Charles since he was a boy, James said finally. Knew his father better. Joseph was tough but fair. Charles is... He trailed off, searching for the right word. Ruthless, I suggested. Ambitious, James corrected. Not necessarily a bad quality in our business, but perhaps untempered by other considerations. I leaned forward. The Hensley Group can't outbid Beaumont Industries, but we can offer partnership instead of acquisition. We can ensure Mercer's legacy continues as you intended it. Partnership? His interest was clearly piqued. What kind of partnership? I outlined my proposal, a strategic alliance that would strengthen both companies while preserving Mercer's independence and commitment to affordable housing. It wasn't as financially lucrative as Charles's offer, but it protected what James had built and created a path forward that honored his values. By the time our stakes arrived, James was asking detailed questions about structure and governance. By dessert, he was suggesting refinements to the proposal, and as we parted, he promised to take it to his board, not with a recommendation he was careful to specify, but as a viable alternative to Charles's takeover bid. It wasn't a victory, but it was a fighting chance. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of meetings, negotiations, and late nights drafting and redrafting the partnership agreement. Richard worked financial magic to make the numbers attractive without overextending the Hensley Group. Olivia coordinated with our legal team to address the board's concerns one by one. Throughout it all, Charles remained oddly silent. No public statements beyond the initial offer, no attempts to contact me directly or through intermediaries. His silence was more unnerving than his usual aggression. The morning of the Mercer Holdings board vote dawned gray and rainy. I had done all I could. The decision now rested in the hands of 13 men and women weighing financial gain against corporate legacy. When my phone rang at 10:17 a.m., I answered with my heart in my throat. Claire, James's voice revealed nothing. The board has voted. I closed my eyes. And? They've rejected Beaumont's offer and approved our partnership agreement. 7-6. Relief flooded through me so intensely that I had to sit down. Thank you, James. Don't thank me, he replied gruffly. I voted my conscience, but so did everyone else. It was close. Close is enough, said. We'll make this partnership work, for both companies and the communities we serve. I know you will. There was a pause, then. Charles called me just before the vote, offered to increase his bid by another 10%. This surprised me. What did you tell him? That some things aren't for sale at any price. James's voice softened slightly. Your grandmother taught me that, you know. Back when I was just starting out and struggling to secure financing for my first affordable housing project. Harriet believed in me when the banks didn't. I hadn't known this piece of history, this additional connection between our families. She was good at recognizing potential. So are you, James said simply. I'll see you Monday to sign the final papers. After we hung up, I sat quietly in my office, absorbing what had just happened. We had prevailed, not through outspending Charles or undermining him, but by offering a vision compelling enough to overcome financial incentives. It felt like a turning point, though I couldn't yet see where the new path led. Later that day, as I was leaving the office, my assistant handed me a small envelope that had been hand-delivered. Inside was a note. On Beaumont Industries stationery, written in Charles's distinctive scrawl, "This round to you. The game continues. CB." I tucked the note into my pocket, neither angry nor triumphant. The game, as Charles called it, had never been the point. The work was the point. The communities built, the lives improved, the legacy honored. If Charles needed to frame it as a competition, to make sense of his world, so be it. I had other priorities. As I stepped into the rainy evening, I felt a strange sense of peace. The Riverside project was proceeding. The Mercer partnership was secured. The Hensley legacy was not just preserved but evolving, adapting to new challenges while remaining true to its core values. Tomorrow would bring new obstacles, new decisions, new opportunities to choose integrity over expediency. But tonight, I would simply appreciate that sometimes, just sometimes, doing business the right way was also doing business the successful way. Harriet would have liked that symmetry. I certainly did. 1 year later, I stood on the rooftop garden of the completed first phase of the Riverside development, watching children play on the community playground below while their parents chatted on benches nearby. The preserved brick facade of the old factory now housed a mix of affordable apartments, small business spaces, and a community center named in Harriet's honor. It's even better than the renderings, Olivia said, joining me at the railing. You can feel the life in it already. She was right. Unlike the sterile perfection of luxury developments, Riverside hummed with authentic energy, families moving in, businesses setting up shop, community programs taking root. It wasn't flawless. There had been construction delays, budget adjustments, and the inevitable compromises that come with any complex project. But it was real and vital. The Mercer team deserves a lot of credit, I acknowledged. Their expertise in affordable housing made all the difference. Our partnership with Mercer Holdings had evolved into something stronger and more effective than either company could have achieved alone. James had become a valued mentor, sharing decades of experience while embracing the innovation the Hensley Group brought to the table. Speaking of credit, Olivia handed me the latest issue of New York Business Review, open to a feature article titled "The New Face of Ethical Development: How Claire Hensley is Changing the Game." I skimmed the article with mixed feelings. The recognition was gratifying, but the framing bothered me. They're making it sound like this is some novel concept I invented. Harriet was doing ethical development decades ago. True, Olivia conceded, but you've updated the approach for today's challenges, and people are noticing. 3 developers have approached us in the last month wanting to learn more about the mixed income model we used here. This was the most encouraging development of all, the idea spreading beyond our projects, influencing how other developers approached their work. Change happened slowly in real estate, where profit margins and risk aversion typically drove decisions, but it was happening. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Hensley Foundation Annual Gala, 7 p.m. This year's event would be particularly significant, marking both the Foundation's 35th anniversary and the launch of a major new initiative focused on sustainable urban housing. We should head back, I said, reluctantly turning away from the view. Lots to do before tonight. As we walked toward the elevator, a familiar figure emerged from the stairwell. Margaret Beaumont, elegant as always despite having just climbed 6 flights of stairs. Margaret, I greeted her with genuine pleasure. Following our reconciliation the previous year, she had become a regular presence at Foundation events and an occasional advisor on philanthropic matters. I didn't know you were visiting Riverside. Today. Impromptu decision, she explained, slightly breathless. I was in the neighborhood for another meeting and wanted to see what all the fuss was about. She gestured at the rooftop garden and the view beyond. Now I understand. It's remarkable, Claire. Thank you. Would you like a tour? We have time before heading back to Manhattan. I'd love one, she accepted graciously. As we showed Margaret around the development, I was struck by her insightful questions and genuine interest. She understood the vision behind the project in a way that many of our investors and even some team members did not. The balance of economic viability and social responsibility, the importance of creating spaces that fostered community rather than just housed individuals. Harriet would be proud, she said as we concluded in the community center lobby, not just of the project, but of how you've handled everything, including Charles. At the mention of her son, I felt a familiar tension. Charles had been relatively quiet since the Mercer Holdings decision, focusing his attention on his Miami development and other ventures outside New York. We still occasionally crossed paths at industry events, exchanging civil but cool acknowledgments before gravitating to opposite sides of the room. "How is Charles?" I asked, more out of politeness than genuine curiosity. Margaret's expression softened with maternal complexity. Pride, concern, and resignation all mingled together. Still Charles. Still convinced that success is measured purely in dollars and square footage. She sighed lightly, but perhaps beginning to question that metric in his own way. This surprised me. "What makes you say that?" "He asks about your projects," Margaret revealed. "Not directly, of course, but he finds ways to bring them up in conversation, to learn how they're progressing." I wasn't sure what to make of this information. Professional interest? Competitive research? Or something more nuanced? "The Miami project is troubled," Margaret continued, lowering her voice slightly, though we were alone in the lobby. "Environmental protests, political complications, financing challenges. Charles won't admit it, but he's beginning to realize that bulldozing through opposition has its limits." I felt no satisfaction at Charles's difficulties. Whatever our history, I took no pleasure in failed projects. Not when communities and investors suffered the consequences. "Perhaps he'll adapt his approach," I suggested. Margaret's smile was tinged with skepticism. "Perhaps, though change comes harder to some than others." She checked her watch. "I should let you get back to prepare for tonight's gala. I'll see you there." As she turned to leave, she added almost as an afterthought, "Charles will be attending as well, his first Foundation event in years." This news left me momentarily speechless. Charles at the Hensley Foundation Gala? It seemed impossible, almost absurd after everything that had transpired between us. "That's unexpected," I managed finally. "My suggestion," Margaret admitted. "Sometimes bridges need to be rebuilt, even when neither party particularly wants to. Cross them." After she departed, Olivia turned to me with raised eyebrows. "Charles Beaumont at our gala? That should make for an interesting evening." "Interesting is one word for it," I agreed, already mentally preparing for the encounter. The Metropolitan Museum of Art's Temple of Dendur provided a breathtaking backdrop for the gala, ancient Egyptian architecture juxtaposed against a wall of glass overlooking Central Park. Soft lighting and tasteful floral arrangements transformed the space without competing with its inherent grandeur. I greeted guests at the entrance, watching the room fill with a carefully curated mix of donors, community partners, and New York influencers. The Morisot painting that had started my confrontation with Charles now hung in a place of honor near the stage, on loan from the Foundation's collection. Margaret arrived early, elegant in midnight blue, with no sign of Charles accompanying her. "He'll be here," she assured me, reading my unasked question. "Though fashionably late, I'm sure." Indeed, it wasn't until the cocktail hour was nearly over that Charles made his entrance. He moved through the crowd with his characteristic confidence, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server and exchanging pleasantries with acquaintances as if his presence at the Hensley Foundation Gala was the most natural thing in the world. I watched him from across the room, trying to gauge his mood, his intentions. He looked different somehow. Not physically, he was as impeccably groomed and dressed as ever, but something in his demeanor had shifted. There was less swagger, more substance. Eventually, as I knew we must, we found ourselves face to face near the temple's reflecting pool. Claire, he nodded, his expression neutral. Impressive event. The foundation seems to be thriving. It is, I confirmed. Thank you for coming, Charles. It means a lot to your mother. Not just to her. His gaze was direct, challenging, but not hostile. I've been following your work at Riverside and the Mercer Partnership. Have you? I kept my tone carefully even. It's an innovative model. He sipped his champagne, then added, successful too, from what I hear, both financially and otherwise. Coming from Charles, this was tantamount to high praise. I inclined my head slightly, acknowledging the sentiment without overreacting to it. And Miami? I asked, deciding to address the elephant in the room. Margaret mentioned you faced some challenges. A flash of the old defensiveness crossed his face, quickly mastered. Yes, significant ones. He paused, then added with visible effort, some of which might have been avoided with a different approach from the beginning. This admission, however oblique, was so unexpected that I momentarily struggled for a response. Development is always complex, I offered finally, especially at that scale. Charles nodded, his gaze drifting to the Morisot painting across the room. That auction, he said suddenly, when you doubled my bid. That was the moment I should have recognized what I was dealing with. And what was that? I asked, genuinely curious. Not just Harriet's granddaughter, he said thoughtfully, but someone who understood something I didn't. Still don't, entirely. He looked back at me. That winning doesn't always look like what you expect. Before I could respond, the dinner chimes sounded, signaling guests to take their seats for the formal portion of the evening. We should continue this conversation, Charles said, surprising me again. Perhaps without an audience. I nodded, not quite trusting myself to speak. As we parted ways to find our respective tables, I felt oddly off balance. This wasn't the Charles I had come to expect. Arrogant, combative, ruthlessly competitive. This Charles was reflective, almost humble, though that seemed a step too far. The gala proceeded smoothly. I gave my speech about the Foundation's achievements and future initiatives. Awards were presented to key community partners. The silent auction exceeded expectations. Throughout it all, I remained acutely aware of Charles watching from his table, his expression thoughtful. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Charles approached me once more. This time, Margaret was with him. Claire, she began, Charles has a proposal I think you should hear. I looked between them, curious despite my wariness. I'm listening. Charles cleared his throat. The Miami project is at an impasse. Environmental concerns, community opposition, financing challenges, all the things I dismissed as minor obstacles have become major barriers. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. I'm not asking for sympathy, he said quickly. I'm proposing a partnership. This was so unexpected that I almost laughed. A partnership? Between Beaumont Industries and the Hensley Group? A limited one? He clarified. Focused specifically on rethinking the Miami development. Your expertise in community integration and environmental sustainability, combined with our existing land holdings and political connections. A joint venture that could salvage the project while transforming it into something better. I studied him, looking for the trap, the angle, the hidden agenda. But all I saw was a businessman, recognizing that his usual methods had failed and seeking a new approach. Why come to me? I asked directly. After everything that's happened between us, there are other developers with similar philosophies. Charles's answer was equally direct. Because you're the best at what you do, and because... He hesitated, glancing at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. Because I think Harriet and my father would have wanted this. A collaboration instead of competition. At least in this instance. The mention of both our predecessors, their complex history, their occasional alliances despite fundamental differences, struck a chord. Perhaps there was something fitting about their heirs finding common ground, however temporarily. I'll need to see the plans, the financials, everything, I said. Not quite a yes, but definitely not a no. Of course, Charles agreed immediately. Full transparency. I've learned that lesson at least. As we exchanged contact information and arranged a preliminary meeting for the following week, I felt a sense of closure that had nothing to do with winning or losing. Charles and I would never be friends. Our visions of development, of business, of success, remained fundamentally different. But perhaps we had reached a point where those differences could occasionally complement rather than conflict. Later, as the last guests departed and the museum staff began discreetly clearing tables, Olivia found me standing alone by the Morisot painting. "So," she said, "a partnership with Charles Beaumont. If someone had suggested that a year ago, I would have questioned their sanity," I finished with a small smile. "Are you really considering it?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I think I am. Not because I trust Charles suddenly or believe he's had some dramatic character transformation, but because it's the right thing for that project, for that community, and because Harriet would have done the same," Olivia completed softly. "She would have," I agreed. "She never let personal feelings interfere with the opportunity to create something worthwhile." We stood in contemplative silence for a moment, gazing at the painting that had unexpectedly become a symbol of this journey, from confrontation to cautious collaboration. "You know," Olivia said finally, "when you doubled his bid that night, I thought it was about putting Charles in his place, about winning." "It was, partly," I admitted. "I'm not above satisfaction at that moment of public vindication. But it was also about something more fundamental. Dignity," Olivia nodded. "Yours and Harriet's." "Yes, and now maybe something else is possible. Not friendship, not forgiveness exactly, but evolution. Moving beyond the past without forgetting its lessons." As we left the museum and stepped into the cool night air, Manhattan glittered around us like a constellation of possibilities. The city Harriet had helped shape, that I was continuing to influence in my own way, that even Charles, perhaps, was beginning to see with new eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The complexities of potentially working with Charles, the ongoing development at Riverside, the expanding Mercer partnership, and dozens of other projects and decisions requiring attention. But tonight, I felt a sense of peace that had been elusive for too long. Not because all conflicts were resolved or all battles won, but because I had remained true to what mattered most, the legacy of dignity Harriet had entrusted to me, and that I had made fully my own. As my driver pulled up to the curb, I took one last look at the museum glowing against the night sky. The auction that had started this journey now seemed like a distant memory, important not for the painting acquired or the rival humbled, but for the path it had set me on. A path of integrity, resilience, and the quiet strength that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you stand for, regardless of who stands against you. In business, in family legacies, and in life itself, that was the only victory that truly mattered.